our pod, and by that I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. Right now we are bum in the year of the Dresden, and we are
Of the Dresden.
covering the first 14 chapters of Blood Rites. Jim Butcher really said, you know what I think the girls need at book 6? More. So that's
more vampires.
More vampires. That's exactly what Laura was waiting for. So thank you so
So
much.
many vampires for the non-vampire girly.
I mean, but maybe some progressive views of sex work. Would Harry date a sex worker? No, but
no, he pities them absolutely. He pities them absolutely, but he is a little more progressive than I thought.
Yes, I did approve of the sex work talk in the sixth book of like, hey, sex workers can
a little shocked
have children and they can be fine with their work and they are not poor women who need to be saved, except when they're being viciously murdered. So before we get into it, Laura, what are you reading, watching, and or enjoying?
So I finished up my reread of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I was listening to the Andy Serkis. I'm sorry, I'm like out of breath. Hold on a second.
I mean, Laura will probably cut this out, but just so you know, we were laughing a lot before we got on, and then we were like, well, we have to record. So we're both a little breathless and a little bit zanier than usual.
Yeah. I'm out of breath, sorry. But I finished up my reread of the Lord of the Rings trilogy by JRR Tolkien. Everybody knows who wrote it. And I listened to the audiobooks narrated perfectly by Andy Serkis. I do not think you didn't know I was a big
I was
fan.
joking. Yeah, I did know. I said I did know you were a big fan of
I thought you said I didn't know I was.
Shocking
you were a big fan.
Like,
what? Oh, let me bring it up again. So there's this guy who plays Gollum in
You're gonna love these, Hannah.
The movie adaptation that came out in the early aughts, and he was fantastic. And so he was chosen to narrate the book series, and they are so good. And Andy Serkis needs more money for these. I know he's probably being paid very well. I don't think it's enough. I I think he needs more money for his narration and acting in this series because it's just phenomenal.
Oh, good.
But I really appreciated on this book listening to it because this was the book that I feel like for some reason, I remember reading The Return of the King more so than the other two books when I was younger because I read these, I think, when I was in junior high and high school. I've read the series many times.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times, but I specifically remember like reading The Return of the King like under the covers. It was one of those things where it was like you're supposed to be in bed, and I was up way too late reading The Return of the King with a flashlight, and I remember like reading the appendices of these and everything and all of these extra details about like the different histories of the different peoples of Middle Earth and like their lineage, this kind of stuff. And I remember thinking at the time like how cool this all was to get all this history and stuff. And I'm like, it's also sad because I know more about the history of Middle Earth than I do world history. So sad. Very unfortunate that I was way more interested in this.
But also it makes sense. I would be
but
more
also
interested in Middle Earth than actual Earth. Let's be real.
Middle Earth's way cooler than real Earth.
Yeah.
But so then on re-listen, I like this read through. It was really interesting to hear Andy Serkis read this because he does all the different voices and everything, and he does a great job. But also, I've been watching the Rings of Power series, and there's parts of the appendices that are like included in the Rings of Power. So it was interesting to get some of this, like these tie-ins, and it made me appreciate the Rings of Power show more because I was like, you know what? People have been hating on this show quite a bit, but the second season, I have become a really big fan of the second season. I thought the first season was good, but the second season, I feel like it got off to a little bit of a rocky start, and I was unsure about some of the decisions because some of the things kind of were interesting choices as far as like style choices for some of the characters, but there were also some choices made in terms of like timeline that I was a little iffy on because some things happened a little bit out of order.
Right.
And I'm a little bit more forgiving of like condensing a timeline to make
Mm-hmm.
some of these things fit since it's an adaptation. But there were a couple things that were happening out of order in the TV show that I was like, I don't know how to feel about that. But overall, the show, as I was watching the show and listening to The Return of the King, and especially getting into the appendices where we're getting some of the history of like the kings of Numenor and all this, and like Durin's line and all this, I was really appreciating what they're doing with the show because I was like, they're taking things that are literally one or two line mentions of things,
Right.
and they're developing longer stories and giving these characters a lot more room to grow, room to breathe, developing entire plots around them, which we likely would not have had otherwise.
Right.
And I really appreciate what they're doing with some of these because like there's a queen of Numenor that is given a lot more agency and things that are going on with her, which it seemed like she was kind of like a not mentioned very much at all in other Tolkien work. So it's neat to have some of this. And I also just think that like the show is doing what an adaptation should be doing,
Mm-hmm.
which is taking, and another thing to mention too is just that I feel like a lot of people hold Tolkien's work so close to their heart. I would not say by any means that I'm like the most diehard Tolkien fan. I don't know all the lore. I don't know all of the things. I have not read all of the works, so I'm sure there's people that maybe even listening that are like, "How dare you talk about Tolkien?" But from my own understanding and like what I have read, which is the Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and the Silmarillion, that there is, and I also have a limited knowledge of some of Tolkien's letters.
Right.
But that Tolkien himself did not have everything fully fleshed out in terms of his world, and that a lot of things were like kind of growing and changing as he moved through it. And so when he died, there was a lot of things that were kind of left open and a little bit malleable. And
Right.
I think that the show did a really great job of working with some of these things and making them a little more open to interpretation
Right.
in terms of the people in the like the different races of people in the world of Middle Earth. I think that they've done a great job with giving them stakes and motivations and actual like reasons and things to consider when they are getting involved in different conflicts. And I think that it makes more sense to have these type of things brought into a story and into an adaptation, especially rather than just have characters that are solely good, solely evil. Like that doesn't make sense. It's
Well,
much
also,
easier to believe in a character that has like questions themselves or has moments of weakness or has moments of bravery that we wouldn't expect.
I think I don't know. As time goes on, we have been a like media has been focused on IP for many, many, many years. So there is so much Lord of the Rings out there. There are three Hobbit movies. There are the original trilogy movies.
Mm-hmm.
This is a portion of that. And I think it's incredibly limiting to always want it to be perfectly tied to the original source
Another
because,
thing to say too, though, is that I don't know that they had the rights to a lot of things. So they had to literally work with what they had the rights to because
yeah,
people were freaking out about certain name changes and stuff like that. And I was questioning, like, do they have the rights to it,
right.
though? Are they only working with things they have the rights to?
Mm-hmm.
Which makes a lot more sense.
I mean, literally, there's going to be a Pharrell Lego movie because people had rights to the Legos, but not any of the IP that is involved with any of the Lego movies. So
That's
just
hilarious.
think about that. Um, but I think people like get way too specific about these types of adaptations where like adaptations do have to change, they do have to grow. And I think it's a unique thing to be like that it's unique to like readers who are like this was a very important book to me, so if it's going to be adapted I want it to be a one for one shot, and it's like, well, that's
Mhm.
not possible because this is a different medium. Whereas like I think there are certain ones, and we're getting better at this with like comic book movies of like comic books had different universes, they had different runs, they were not the same thing over and over and over again.
And even within different writers and artists, things changed quite a bit. So,
And like even artists have like if you think about it, like Gwen Stacy from Spider-Man, Stan Lee went on the record that he thought she was boring, which is why he killed her off. Like,
yep.
and then people redeveloped it who found like actual interest in her character and they changed it because it
Hmm.
worked for them. So I
Yeah.
think like that's okay to do. And I think as readers, we kind of have to get a little bit more or a little less precious about certain things and letting it be what it is. And
And you know what? I understand like wanting to holding something very dear
right,
to you. Like for a lot of people, this was one of the original escapist works that
right,
people clung to. You know, that this was a lot of people's first venture into not only fantasy work, but reading.
reading. Hmm.
And that it was something that people, and I'm a good example too. I read this at a young age. I've reread this series many, many times.
Hmm.
And it's something that I hold as like a comforting thing, as a comfort read. I love to be back in this world. But at the same time, I think that we need to be a little more forgiving of an adaptation, which is trying to return people to this world, working within certain constraints, and at the same time trying to make somewhat of a fresher story
Right.
that fits the times. And I will accept criticism for certain things. I'm not saying that this show is without criticism.
Right.
I'm not saying that at all. I have found certain things myself that I mentioned just a little bit ago. I was a little unsure, getting into some of the things in the second season because I was like, that's not the right order. Just
Right.
it doesn't go in the order of the poem, but whatever. So there were things that I even was like, but and even like some of the choices with like how they depicted certain things happening. Like I mentioned the Sauron blob that I was like, that's weird.
Yeah.
But I think overall this season has done an excellent job of taking things that were literally just like one line mentions in the appendices of the books or things that were mentioned briefly in Tolkien's letters and that he even kind of changed his mind on and grew and adapted, or
Hmm.
things that were mentioned briefly here and then he changed his mind and mentioned it in a different way here and then it mentioned it in a different way here, that people were like, well, how does that actually happen? We're still a little unsure. So I
Right.
think this show has done an excellent job of taking some of these things and making them into a show that I think is a beautiful acknowledgement of
Hmm.
Tolkien's work and allows fans to get back into the world, and also brings in these characters that I personally loved seeing. Like Celebrimbor in the second season was wonderful to see, and I loved the actor's portrayal. I actually really loved Soren in the second season. I thought that was a great portrayal too. But I think me concurrently listening to The Return of the King and also watching the show gave me a better appreciation for the show itself, because I was able to see how the show writers were taking just a lot of information and things that were just briefly mentioned
Right.
and developing things out of them and making them interesting. I think for me, some of the storylines that I was more interested in the first season, I became less interested in, and like kind of flip-flopped on the things that I became more interested in the second season. And I also thought that was a great thing too, because there were a lot of people talking about like how they thought like the storyline in Numenor was boring. I actually really enjoyed the Numenor storyline. I thought that that was good too. And I in the first season I was pretty interested in the Harfoots and thought that they were really cute and fun. This season I was not as interested in the Harfoots. I was like, yeah, whatever. It is what it is. And
Yeah.
we had some quote unquote shocking reveals. Not that shocking, but I I think everyone knew where that was going. But I do think that there were some interesting things that played out in terms of the motivations of the characters. And I really think that the way that Celebrimbor, Galadriel, Adar, and Sauron were portrayed in this season was just very, very, very well done and very nuanced for these characters to show their motivations, their flaws, and the things and possible like things that they would be going through and struggles that these internal struggles that they would be going through.
Yeah.
And I just think that Tolkien fans need to, like the hardcore fans need to give it a shot. And I hope that this continues to get the seasons that they want. I think they want to give it 5 seasons.
Yeah.
And I think that would be great to have this.
And
Go
I
ahead.
also think it's good to like, if this isn't for you and you do hold it too dear, you can also just tap out, but then like
You
don't be a
can not
part of the
watch it.
conversation. Like
Exactly.
you know what show
Don't
what
be hating on it if you're not watching it.
you know what book I loved? The Uglies. You want to
Hmm.
know what hit Netflix recently? And I'm like, maybe I don't need to watch that movie. The Uglies. It looks like it's going
Yeah.
to be bad. And honestly, that book was so like instrumentally important to me as a child. And I don't need to participate in the movie unless I'm in the mindset of hate watching it. Guess what?
Yep.
I hate watched Persuasion. I thought it was a terrible adaptation. And Persuasion is very important to me. But it's okay for me to tap out of like
Yep.
month-long exhaustive going into why I hated a certain thing. Like I
Yep.
can just hate something and that can also be okay. But like I think it's what you said of like if you're not going to participate in it and you know that it's too precious to you, it doesn't mean that it is a bad adaptation.
Exactly. And I think that when we're getting into that, I would just ask that like along in the same line that if you're not watching it, please don't be hating on it for the people who do enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
It's perfectly fine for you to sit out, but if you haven't watched it, it's incredibly uncalled for you to review it.
Yeah.
For one thing, like please don't review bomb something if you have not watched it.
Unless
Or
it's
if
like
you're
by a
literally
predator.
making, yeah, like, or if you're literally making claims about something that, because I've heard a lot of people, I hear this about Star Wars properties too a lot, and I
Yeah.
just don't think the arguments about like the writing is bad or like it's always the writing was bad
Yeah.
is one of the things. And I'm just like, if you can give me specific examples of why the writing was bad, like I can understand like, oh, certain times dialogue was clunky. I can get on board with that. But overall,
Also,
not a thing
I am
that the
positive you
writing was
looked
bad.
back in someone in one of those people's like favorite TV shows of all time, the writing might be bad. Like there are
Oh yeah.
certain things where it's like, no, that's just your belief because it's a good way to criticize and say you can't, I'm not
Yes.
hating on it for a bad reason. I
Yep.
just think the writing is bad. And it's like, okay, but like you like things with bad writing. Like
Yes.
everyone does. So it can't just be that the writing is bad because we all have bad things that we love watching.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just, if you have legitimate criticisms, I will take them, but I need reasons for why the writing is bad. It is, I guess, what I'm getting at. Because
Yeah.
if you just say, well, the writing was bad and you end it there, and this is me projecting because I have gotten into it with people on Reddit about this show. So, listeners, I have an anonymous Reddit that I creep on Reddit often, and I've been on Reddit for years, and I just like lurk in the shadows there, as you should. You should not be actively engaging on Reddit. I feel like it's bad for you, but I will get, get into it with people on there about certain fandoms and stuff, and I have had people like come at me and say like, "Oh, the writing is bad," but then they cannot quote why
One
the
bad
writing
scene.
is
Yeah. They
bad.
heard it from someone who heard it from someone.
Yes.
Like,
So, and I am not a writer, so I'm sure there's people that have listened to this podcast and like she makes she has bad reviews. She doesn't know what she's talking about in terms of the books that she likes and everything. The books she likes are stupid, blah blah blah. She likes bad TV,
you are
whatever.
really projecting so hard right now. Knowing that I'm
Whatever.
sure most people
I
do not think that, Laura.
I'm I don't know who's listening, but I'm just thinking though that it's like I'm not somebody who's like the person who's like, "Oh, I'm the
I'm so
writing
smart.
expert."
Yeah.
I I'm average Joe, and I don't know what you mean when you say the writing is bad. So
Right.
you need to give me reasons. But I thought really a lot of things were done really, really well in this second season. The seventh episode, the penultimate episode, was heartbreaking and beautiful and really, really, really great.
Oh, good.
So yeah, the last 3 episodes I really enjoyed. So
God, I
I've
gotta
been
watch this
really
show.
enjoying this return to Tolkien's world, and I kind of honestly feel a little bit bad for the people that were like, I hate Rings of Power after the first season and tapped out because I'm like, the
Mm,
second season ended up being
way
really dang
better.
good.
Okay.
It was a lot better. And this is a perfect example of why we need to give creators a little bit more time and room to breathe
Yeah.
when they say that they have an idea for how long they want to put their show out or whatever, because this is a good example of how much improvement we can get within a season. I think a similar thing
Mm.
happened within Wheel of Time, Hannah, and you
Uh,
might agree
yeah.
too that the second season there were some choices made, but the second season was honestly a lot better
It
than the first
was
season.
so good. That second season was a bop. Like, just, yeah,
And they
so good.
condense things. They're making choices. They're choosing which storylines to follow, which characters to highlight, that type of thing. And it might not always be the way that people want it to go, but I think overall they're making some smart decisions, and
Hmm.
the people at Prime Video are maybe putting a little more trust in their writers and giving them more opportunity to have success with their shows because they are giving them more time.
Right.
And I cannot say the same thing for some of the other fandoms that I am part of because I'm very disappointed that like Disney is so quick to cut off some of these Star Wars projects that could have been really good, and they're
Hmm.
kind of giving in to fans.
Yeah.
And it upsets me a little bit because like shows like The Acolyte, I get it. I You didn't like it or whatever for X, Y, or Z reason. It was the writing. Whatever. It was not the writing. It's a good show. And I think that it was left in a place that we definitely should be, questioning the Jedi and their motivations as
Hmm.
these not wholly good people. I like shows and pieces that question the morality of people, and there's not a completely moral good or moral bad.
Right.
And The Acolyte was a show that was not stuck within the Luke Skywalker of it all or the
Hmm.
Anakin Skywalker of it all, and was actually kind of tackling some of these ideas of maybe the Jedi were kind of doing some bad things and we were not acknowledging it. These are
Hmm.
questions that are brought up in books and comics, but we don't get them on the screen.
Right.
So it's really disappointing that this is like kind of on the flip side of what's happening over at Amazon, that Disney is very quick to just be like, oh, that one got review bombed. We're done. One
Right.
season.
Also,
And that they're
so
not giving them
weird.
a little more room to grow.
Right.
And it also kind of happened with The Mandalorian. You can point out too that like their third season of The Mandalorian, and I went on record saying I didn't think that one was as good. However, they were quick to just be like, we're gonna just do a movie now instead, and then we'll just end it there. And I'm like, that seems like the wrong format for that, but whatever. And
Yeah.
it also seems like you were very influenced by the bad reviews, so you're
Hmm.
quick to just be like, this is what we'll do, a movie to get us out of this pickle and call that our end.
Right.
But it seems like, from what I can tell as just a viewer and what I'm seeing online from fandoms that are very toxic in certain corners, that it seems like Disney's quick to cave to the fandom,
Yeah.
the toxic fandom, and that so far, Amazon Prime Video, they are putting a little more trust in the creative process and hoping that viewers will just learn to have a little more faith in their people.
Yeah.
So definitely enjoying both finishing my re-listen of Lord of the Rings and then watching Rings of Power. I would definitely recommend you watch it, Hannah. You're not as
I
big
need
into
to.
Lord of the Rings, but I think that it would be like kind of a popcorn show for you, really. Enough about the world and everything. You've read the series that I think
I really
that you
liked
would
the Lord of the
probably
Rings
enjoy it.
movies. I actually really like the Lord of the Rings movies. I think sometimes I'm a little bit less like into even if it's Middle Earth history. Sometimes history is not my
Yeah.
strongest point, but I enjoyed the Lord of the Rings. Like, I mean, I got engaged at a tiny Hobbiton, so I'm
Yeah,
not anti Lord of the Rings by any means. It's just not something that's always on my radar. So,
sure. I
um,
also think too that it might be a little controversial. Hannah, have you watched the Hobbit movies?
I have watched the first Hobbit movie. I don't know if I've seen this. I don't think I saw the second one.
so this might be a little controversial, but I was not as big a fan of the Hobbit movies, but
Mhm.
I went and saw all of them in theaters. So I was enough of a fan to see all of them in theaters, and I saw Battle of Five Armies twice in theaters. So it's not like I'm not a fan of them,
Right.
but I feel like I like them quite a bit less than the original trilogy movies,
Right.
and they took a lot of liberties too with that
I mean, they had to
trilogy
shove a
series.
children's book into 3 movies, so they really had
Yes.
to expand on the universe for that
Yes.
one.
So this is going to be controversial. We're going to get canceled. I think that, in my own opinion, I think season two of Rings of Power was more enjoyable than those Hobbit movies.
Oh, fair enough. Well, I
So,
don't think, I mean, my thing with the Hobbit movies is it always frustrated me because you could tell it was just kind of a cash grab of like,
oh, absolutely. And
everyone's
they're
doing
making
three
more because now
movies.
they're going to
So,
have the Hunt for Gollum and
ew.
the War of
Yeah.
the Rohirrim, and which the War of the Rohirrim is like an anime style that looks
Oh, that's
really
fun.
good.
Okay.
So,
Well, you can't win them all, but you can't lose them all either. So glad to hear
no.
it.
But you know what? Those I'm just gonna leave it at that for what I've been reading and enjoying, because that has been like a main kind of mainstay in what I've been reading and watching, because it's been so enjoyable for me to read and watch that show. And then I'll save the other stuff for our next episode.
Love
So
to
Hannah,
hear
what
it.
have you been reading and watching?
So this will make Laura very happy. I read Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Bouilly.
I love that book.
Laura loved it so much that we actually, for a good month, you could tell that Laura and I haven't been recording as much, or we've been planning ahead, because you could tell that we like physically miss each other because we just keep reading books that the other one has recommended.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of other books that I will mention next time that you have recently read.
Right. And so I feel like you and I both were like, well, I'm going to read a book that Laura enjoyed. So I read it. I really liked it. I thought it was very good. Um,
It's such a good YA.
it's a very good YA. I really liked like the complexity of the book, that it looked like an
Hmm.
identity, and it was, you could tell it was like very much like in a very specific like region, and it was based on a certain person's experience, and like I liked the world building that happened in the book, where she like talks about like going to a powwow, but she can't actively participate in the powwow because she's grieving. And I think like some parts didn't work for me. I did not care about the love interest at all, but like that's also a high schooler versus
I
adult
feel
reading
like
a book.
I also was kind of just like, Why do we care about this?" But again, it's a YA, so
Yes.
I was like, whatever, we'll excuse this.
Look, I used to be a horny teen too. I get it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to have it in there, but I just
Young
did
Laura
not.
would have been like,
But
"This is amazing."
they have to wind up together, don't they? Like, yeah.
Of
Um
course he would love her and then go on jogs together.
I also would say that like I think this book was super good. It's 5 stars.
Yeah.
The who done it was incredibly easy to guess.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
yes.
I was just like, okay, when are we gonna find out what happened? Because it's going on a little too long now. But other than that, great book, super enjoyable time. I can't wait to read the second book in the
I
series.
know. Me too.
Because that looks good. I have too many audiobooks out right now, or else I would have gotten it immediately and listened to it. So, and in a little bit different, but I have read a lot of Stephen Graham Jones this year. I feel like he's the one I'm
Yeah,
going
you
through
were
his
a big fan.
backlog. I don't even know if I'm a big fan. Do you ever have those books where you're like, well, I'm going to listen to the entire thing, even though I'm not sure I like them? I think that's how I sort of have come down, because I don't know if I
I
always
mean,
love
that's
his
how I am with
writing.
Darth Vader comics, where I'm just like, these are just all gonna be 3 stars. So, but
Yeah, I think that's how I am with him, which I also like. I've gone on record about this. I think that should have, I mean, Stephen Graham Jones is an Indigenous author, and I have read almost every Megan Miranda book in all of existence, and all of them are like sometimes 0 stars for me, and I think they're
wow.
actively bad, but I still read them. So, like,
Hmm.
yeah, sometimes people
Still
should
happening.
read a book that isn't that great by an Indigenous author or a person of color just as much as
Hmm.
they do it for white people, because we should
Yeah.
aim to let everyone be mediocre, and it doesn't always have to be the best book you've ever read. And so like his books are, they're
Oh,
horror now.
absolutely. I think there's too many people that are like, this book must be 5 stars. And
Yeah.
I think there's like very much an idea, and even authors too are kind of like disappointed when they get a 3 star review. And I'm like, you know what? I think it's very okay to just be like, I liked this book.
sometimes
there's nothing wrong with just liking a book
I don't
and not thinking it's the best thing ever.
I don't always want to read a 5-star book. Sometimes I do want to
Yep.
read a 3-star book and have a good time and just let
Yep.
it be okay. And so I think sometimes his books fall more on that side of things, but like they're so enjoyable that I'll definitely do them. And I think they've been
Hmm.
like letting me branch into horror more, which is also the goal of like, I think I actually really like the story writing that goes into horror. And so
Sure.
I want to investigate that thought process more, and his are right on the like cusp of what I like, which is more slasher than horror.
Okay.
So, I read Mongrels, by Stephen Graham Jones, and this is a book about a young boy who, his family is werewolves, and they
Okay.
have to like travel throughout the country to like kind of hide who they are and like what it takes. And like, I really thought the world building was very effective in this because he like talks about what it actually takes to be a werewolf and like how when they become a werewolf they become incredibly hungry and they have to eat everything
Hmm.
in sight, which can also be dangerous because then when they shift back into their human form they like can't process what they ate before
Oh my
in wolf
gosh.
form, and so it's like incredibly dangerous for them sometimes. And I thought that was like a very unique way to build on the horror trope of werewolf. And like it did have a lot in there about the like, there are a lot of stereotypes when it comes to werewolf materials, that like werewolves are often seen as people of color or they
Hmm.
are seen as people in lower economic statuses. And it
A
really
lot of
like,
shapeshifters in general.
yes. And so it really investigated that and like what it takes to like have to move around a lot, and like
Hmm.
why having like when you do that like you're not going to get the best grades and you're not going to have as many opportunities because you have to leave town if something happens and you did something terrible,
Sure.
and so I thought that was really interesting. So overall, I think I really liked the book. I don't think it was like the most amazing book, but I don't think that's what I
Hmm.
wanted out of it. I wanted a spooky story that I enjoyed, and
Sure.
it 1,000% delivered that. So like, I think so far of his books, I've liked the second of the Indian trilogy the best, the Indian Lake trilogy.
Okay.
Um, that was one of my top ones. Definitely. Oh my gosh, what's that one? Only Good Indian, The Only Good Indian.
Hmm.
That was probably his best so far. But I also really enjoyed, it's a novella, so it's really short, Night of the Living Mannequin. That one was
Okay.
super freaky, and I loved it. So I think those are my top of his so far because I've read the majority of his work by now.
Okay.
So if you're interested in looking at the best of Stephen Graham Jones, I definitely say like go to that. But like none of his books are bad. I think that there some of them
Hmm.
are just better than others, and some of them are just okay.
Sure.
And so I did both of those books on audio, and then for a recent read, Hannah's about to get married, ladies and gentlemen.
Hmm.
So Hannah
Hmm.
did a rom-com, because I needed to read something fast and actually finish it. I kept like opening a book, reading pages, and being like, I think I'm just not going to read for the next 5 days. And I'm like, well, that's not
Hmm.
good because we do a book podcast where you have to read. So I was like, you know what usually cures this? Romance novels. And so I did one. I did The Rom-Commers by Catherine Center.
Okay.
Um,
I've heard of Catherine Center. Why do I know that
she
name?
did The Bodyguard, which
Okay.
is a pretty famous
Maybe.
one.
Okay.
Um, I didn't love it. I thought it
Okay.
was a little bit like it made me cry because there was dead mom stuff, but like all
Mm.
dead mom things make me cry. So like you didn't try that hard. It wasn't that impressive. Everything with a dead mom makes me cry. But this follows a woman who and I want to caveat this with like, I think this sounds good, but I think the execution was a little bit disappointing. So it
Okay.
follows a woman named Emma whose dad was in a horrible accident, where her mom died and left her dad, as someone who needed a lot of assistance. Like he is prone to seizures.
Mm.
He like can't get like a level head in certain things, and like he is half paralyzed.
Okay.
Um, and this happened like on a
From the
camping.
seizure activity or
Yes.
okay.
Oh, and like from the accident mostly, but then the
Okay.
seizure activity was like an extension of what occurred.
Okay.
And you find out that like Emma is his primary caretaker, and she like works at a college, but she also works on screenwriting, and she's hired to work with one of her favorite screenwriters who wrote a terrible romantic comedy. And so she goes to write it with him, and sparks fly. And I just, this book sounded really good. Like I think I like it sounds good to like read a book about a caretaker who's like doing all these things, and it's good, but like I didn't really buy the romance. Like they just didn't, there wasn't enough on the actual
Okay.
page. We got told a lot about them, but then like nothing really happened on the page besides them slowly getting feelings for each other.
Is
They're
it a
also,
series or a standalone
so it's like every other romance where it's a bunch of different people in the same
within the
universe
same
and
universe?
sometimes they interact. So like
I
like you
honestly wish more romances would become series because I think there's just like when we're talking about time constraints, there's so many romances that are trying to work within this. Like, we've got a month here, people.
mm-hmm.
And it's like, that is
Gotta
not enough time.
happen now or never. Yeah. And that's
And it
like,
takes away from the believability of it all when we're talking about love, I think sometimes, because
yeah,
we as humans, as we are aging, are finding it harder to get on board with
right.
people falling in love in 20 minutes.
And like even in the book, it's a joke where he's like, it takes you at least 80 days to fall in love. And she's like, how do you know that? And he's like, I looked it up for reasons. And it's like, okay, well, got it.
Because there's
But
200 pages in this book. That's why.
yeah. And I thought like, I think maybe why the romance definitely didn't work for me is because like there wasn't enough, there was so much miscommunication in this book where I was like, is this woman stupid at this point?
Oh
Like
no.
I don't understand why we're still having the same conversation of like, I guess he doesn't like me. And I'm like, that's obviously not what's going on. He is acting very erratically. You should know something's going on. And then it kind of got like a little bit too zany at the end for me.
Hmm.
So I was actually mad when it made me cry because I was about to go to bed and I was like, I didn't even like this book that much. But like, um, and I don't know, there's just certain books where I'm like, this, it doesn't feel as light as I think it wants to be.
Hmm.
Um, and so overall, it felt, and maybe this is, I'm so sorry, my thoughts are so scattered, but parts of it is also like certain books that are about caretakers like this. I think they could be effective use tools for characterization and for actually showing a representation of humanity that is not often seen. I
Hmm.
think that is wonderful. Here it felt a little bit like trauma dumping into a novel
Yeah.
because like not only does the dad have this, the mother died tragically, and not only that, but the main love interest has health scares and health issues, and it's like this feels weird. And I looked up, like, she wrote another book about a woman who gets like face blindness from like a medical thing, and I don't know if this is a woman who's like worked with people who have had these types of issues and that's why she's
Okay.
passionate about writing about them, but like it felt a little too Jodi Picoultish in it of like
Hmm.
something traumatic has to happen for these people, and I'm like, yeah, I read those books in high school, I know I can enjoy them, but like they're not really my bag anymore, you know.
I do think that's a
um
thing too, though, that when we're talking about representation of, especially when we are talking about like representation of like chronic illnesses or what have you, that we don't need to have them all in one book.
right,
Like, it's fine for us to just have one illness represented, if that is epilepsy or what have you, to
right,
have one illness represented and be talking about the fatigue of being a caregiver related to that. And we don't need to also have a character that's like, I completely understand because I also have these three chronic illnesses. And it's like, not saying that that doesn't also happen in real life. There are so many different things that people go through and can relate to other people for, but it tends to be a lot when you're reading something that you thought was going to be just like a popcorn read about like
right.
a romance, and you thought, oh cool, we're also getting some rep in here, but then it becomes a lot of things.
And then, and like small spoilers because it's not, it's like the love interest has cancer and then he's like, well, I
Hmm.
don't want to make her take care of me, you know, and it's just like, okay.
Okay.
And it's her dad has Meniere's disease,
Okay.
which like it leads to serious falls, unexpected severe vertigo attacks that can put you at risk for falls and your everyday activities and things like that. So I thought it was
Okay.
like, I was like, oh, that's really good representation. And then as the execution came forward, I was like, I don't love this execution. It feels trauma dumpy and it's not my bag. So
Hmm. I've also
that
felt that way about certain books where it's like you start reading it and you're like, oh cool that they're mentioning that, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, now we've mentioned
this so
seven
many
different
times.
things,
Yeah.
and it honestly takes away from the representation of any one of those given
Right.
things a little bit, because then we're spreading ourselves a little thin. And people maybe disagree with us on this, but I do agree with you that it does become a little bit like trauma dumping, where it's just like
Yeah.
there's too many things happening here, unfortunately, that
Yeah. And like
need
I know
to
that that can
narrow it
happen in
down
the
a
real
little.
world, but like it just
Yeah.
means there's less on the and like I will say one good thing about this book, there is a moment where like her sister's helping take care and like small spoilers, like something happens and she's rushing back home and she reacts really strongly to the sister
Mm,
being there and like it's not good, but at the same time
hmm
the sister then says like they have like a little bit of a fight over it and the sister is the person that everyone is like, no, she was kind of in the wrong. And I was like, I appreciate that because like it wasn't, they were saying the sister was in the wrong, not the main character. And I was like, because the main
hmm
character has been taking care of the dad for the past 10 years. And so for
Yeah.
everyone to like slowly kind of agree, like, we're not going to really press on how she reacted in this situation because she gets to be irrational in that situation. I was like, you know what? Good for
Sure.
them. Because I think in a lot of the books, they're like, you should not have talked to her that way. And it's like, she's not acting rationally. She's tired, she's scared, and
Yeah.
like and she's been taking care of her dad for 10 years, and her sister has been doing this for 5 weeks. So, like, we're not going to pretend like it's not incredibly traumatic for this woman.
Right.
Like, I did appreciate that, but just barely. You know, and then for watching, Laura, have you ever had a moment where you're like, I've been wanting to watch a show forever and ever and ever, and I haven't, even though I know I'll probably love it. And then you watch it and you were
Oh
like,
yeah, so
I
many.
was right.
I was right.
I started watching Fargo and I'm obsessed. It's now halfway to my entire personality. So,
Oh, wow.
um, I
Halfway. It's
halfway. I mean, I'm not gonna like go all over, but because like I didn't binge it. I've just been watching it slowly because I think it would be very hard to binge, but I enjoy it immensely. Um, so Fargo, for those who do not know, Fargo is a kind of it's an anthology series that is inspired and based on a 1996 film by the Coen brothers, who are very famous director slash movie creators.
Mhm.
And the original Fargo is like considered one of the like best films ever. And very interesting because like in it, like Frances
Have
McDormand
you
is
watched
like,
the films?
yes, I have watched the film.
Okay. I
Um,
was just wondering.
and in it, like Frances McDormand is very well known for being like a pregnant detective or police officer who kind of gets
Okay.
thrown into the situation, and like through it all, she is doing all of these things that usually is like this grizzled detective figuring out, and she's kind of just like a bumbling Minnesotan like who is incredibly
Okay.
pregnant, and that's supposed to be like part of the charm of it. And so this series in season one, it follows these people in Bemidji, Minnesota, where there's like this put upon salesman who is played by Martin Freeman, and people look up Martin Freeman for like some not great things about him. He has been
hmm
rightfully critiqued about certain things, but he plays
Like The
this.
Hobbit.
Yes, the Hobbit and not his like very racist comments. Totally, that's what we're
Oh
going
yeah. Oh,
for.
those.
just just the Hobbit. But he I don't want to spoil too much, but like he is someone who's like very put upon, but also like incredibly you can tell like he's not a good guy. He thinks he's like the
hmm
quintessential like nice guy, and we kind of watch him fall
Within the
into
show, you're saying.
yeah in the
Okay.
show.
Because I
And
don't know
he
anything
like
about him outside of The
no no
Hobbit,
no no
really.
no no no
And Love Actually.
yeah, fair enough. What a
Oh, and
wild
Sherlock. I
time.
watched him in that.
Yeah, I know. It's very much Sherlock. I remember Love Actually. I was not allowed to watch the naked parts for the longest time because I was watching
That's
it far too
hilarious.
young. And so whenever Martin Freeman showed up at the end of the movie, I was like, "Who's this?" Like, because his entire
His entire storyline
his
is
entire
gone
storyline
from
was
you.
just nude, so I never knew who he was. And then when my mom was finally old, at some point my mom had to be like, "Hey, you can like stop closing your eyes now. You're like almost an adult." Because like I was just, "Oh yeah, you're supposed to close your eyes at these parts." I was like, "Oh, that's who that is." So
That's hilarious.
random look at like the youngest child being raised in a home with an age gap. There were a lot of movies
And
that
the
I just
obedience to just actually close your eyes.
I was such an obedient child. Like I remember 10 Things I Hate About You. There's a moment where one of them gets a penis drawn on his face and I was told to close my eyes during that scene.
And you
And
just
then
did.
and I just did until my mom figured out that I probably wouldn't know what it was and then she let me off. And she was right. I was a really, really sheltered child. So
I mean, same girl, same.
yeah, a Pretty Woman. I also was made to close my eyes a lot in Pretty Woman because it was inappropriate. So many movies that Hannah watched with her eyes closed. Um, but anyway, so we just kind of like see this man. He meets up during this, he meets with a hitman, and the hitman kind of changes his life forever. And then there are, very bumbling idiot cops throughout the series. It's so well done. Like, it's so well crafted, and the characterization of everyone is so interesting, and I love it. I think it's really good.
Okay.
It's fun to watch with my fiance because I was like, oh, because Colin Hanks is in it. And I was like, well, Tom Hanks's son, you shouldn't be doing that. He was like, that's Tom Hanks's son. And no
He
idea.
couldn't tell?
He had no idea. He's
I think they
terrible
look
with
a lot
actors.
alike.
They do, but he just does not know actors or actresses.
Oh,
So,
okay.
um, yeah, but I've been enjoying it. I think it's a really good show. And yeah, can't wait to continue with it. I have 2 episodes left in the first season, and it is an anthology, so I get all new characters next season. It's
Yay.
like just a little crime drama for me.
Honestly, I really like those type of shows that switch it up.
It's such an effective way to tell stories, and then like you
Mm-hmm.
don't get sick of characters,
Yep.
and it's just so interesting. So I'm a big fan. Um, and then Laura, I won't talk about it too much because emotionally I can't handle it. I'm sure Laura doesn't want to hear me wax poetic, but like everyone go see Wild Robot because it's adorable. It's just about a robot who is dropped on a remote island, and she decides to learn how to speak to animals because she's supposed to be helping them. And then she tries to help them, and they all hate her because she is a robot. And then she just goes to help them all and make their lives better, including a cute little gosling that is starring the actor from um oh, what's it called? Heartstopper. Uh
Mm-hmm.
Nick.
He plays
So
Charlie.
yeah, no, he plays Nick.
Oh, Nick. Okay.
Nick, yeah. And I just really loved that movie, so everyone go watch it because we need more movies like it.
Can I tell you that just before we started recording, I had saw a tweet that Kmatar put out that they had went and seen this with their kids, and they said it was so fun to actually go and see a movie with their kids, and they got to quietly sob through.
It was really hard because I had to sit next to a small child who I did not know, and you are sitting there sobbing, and I'm like, this child thinks I'm insane. Like, and I was worried that like because we were talking about it, and I said I thought like I have nieces and nephews of varying ages, and I thought some of them might be bored by it, but I think if you can hit a
Mhm.
certain age, you would actually really like it. So it's dependent, but what a good time. What a good movie. So many tears were shed. I loved it. I thought it was so cute and good
Mm.
about found family. And the first time I cried was the robot is going to sleep to like charge her batteries, and a little fox snuggles up right next to her, and the little gosling goes, I get sad when she goes to sleep too. And I was like, oh my
Oh,
gosh, it was so sweet. So yeah, that movie broke me and everyone around us. So I made my sister-in-law come to it with us. She was happy to go to it. I walked up and I was like, I think this is a movie you would enjoy. Do you want to come? And she was like, yeah, I do want to see that. And so
it sounds
uh,
like Becky Chambers fans would probably like that.
oh my gosh, it is meant for Becky Chambers fans. And my sister-in-law is a huge Becky
Mhm.
Chambers fan. So she was like, this looks like
Bingo.
my favorite little novella. And I was like, that's what I thought. And so, great time, so many tears. And now let's talk about Harry Dresden.
Another great time with so many tears.
So tears of frustration. Who knows? Um, I do like these
I'm
notes.
nervous because this one I'm not vibing with as much as
I actually
the last two.
So I don't think I actually like it as more of this feels like a straightforward murder mystery, which is more my vibe
That's
of
fair.
like,
That's fair.
here are the people who are suspects. And I'm like, actually, thank you for giving me just a straightforward mystery
Yeah,
with
that
them.
that actually is fair.
And the vampires actually make sense in this book because they're key players in it. So the
It's finally a book
million
about
vampire,
vampires.
yeah, it's finally about them, and we don't have to be like, well, this is actually a book about ghosts and vampires.
It's a book about fairies. Never mind, it's vampires.
Oh
It's a
my
book about
gosh.
demons, but vampires.
I do love this because I was doing talk to text to read this really quick because I left the book somewhere and I had to buy a Kindle version and I can't scroll through Kindle as fast as I can scroll through a book. And so my first line is, "We meet Harry," and I'm like, "Hannah, we've met. We've met Harry. We know who he is, but." He is trying to rescue puppies from evil flying chimpanzees.
Yeah,
Uh,
which can I just say terrifying? Like I recently watched that Chimp Crazy
oh
documentary where the chimps
yeah.
were attacking people and like horror stories of chimpanzees attacking people. So
Yeah.
to read this, I was like, oh no.
Happens everywhere.
But
Um,
yeah, they're like these flying chimp demons that are in an old school building, and there's like a giant King Kong version that is purple
oh
that's
good.
going after
Yeah.
them too. Like, ugh.
Yeah, and Harry runs out and he's like, "Get in the car." And Thomas is there driving the getaway car. And I honestly thought Thomas was Billy, the werewolf. Like when
Oh, no, no,
I
no, no,
got
this is Hot
confused and
Thomas.
it's Hot Thomas. And then I realized that in the original book, I thought Thomas had white hair. And it wasn't until reading this where I was like, "Oh, Billy, dark hair, got it." And then I was like, "Wait, what?" And then I was like, "Thomas has dark hair?" And I
Yep.
honestly was just envisioning a sexy Lucius Malfoy, I guess.
Oh, okay.
That was my original
No,
thought.
Thomas is a hottie with a body,
He's a hottie with
and
a body and long dark hair.
yeah, he
So
cannot
that's on me.
control it, and he has a lover
He has a
that
lover named
he
Justine
has a lot of issues with, honestly.
who he is,
Uh,
let's face it, raping. Because she
yeah.
cannot consent to the things he is doing to her quite often. So don't
And
love that.
and
Um, yeah.
he's feeding off of her all the time too, which
She's
is
like a little zombie. It's so gross.
it's really uncomfortable.
And I hate the like, I should understand. They have a love for one another. And I'm like, nope, because a lot of the time she can't
No.
consent with the way he's doing things.
Right.
Like, there's a TV show Misfits where one of the people's powers is the second she touches someone, they get like incredibly lustful for her and want to have sex
Hmm.
with her. And an entire part of that is like how she has to build a relationship because she can't touch anyone because then they have like almost no memory of the situation. And so she's like, any physical relationship I would get into is non-consensual. And it's like an
Yeah.
actual important part of like a relationship with someone where they feel violated after she touches them and they have to like
Hmm.
get through it and then they can only like have physical intimacy through non-physical things because of her power. And it's like that's actually a healthy way of looking at that instead
Right.
of this, which is like they just love each other so much she's okay with him feeding off of her. And I'm like, well, you can't do that when it like, turns you into a
Eh.
lifeless zombie.
Yeah,
um
when you cannot even speak,
But
sure.
anyway, puppies. So Harry saves a bunch
Little
of puppies.
puppies.
There is a very ferocious one with a notched ear who I was like, well, he's sticking around for at least one
Hmm.
book.
Yep.
And
We've got him for a while.
Harry and Thomas are like having a discussion of like, are you actually happy in your life, Harry? As they like battle demon monkeys. Um, and there's a lot of like, why are
Yeah,
you
it's like,
like that?
why do you continue to do this? You
I
don't get paid that much. And Harry's like, I don't know. I just really enjoy saving Chicago. And Thomas is like, you mean the world? You
Didn't
saved
you
the
save the world
world.
twice in the last 2 years? I was reading this out loud to Paul, and Paul pointed out that this was likely like Jim Butcher trying to be like, I have to do a recap somehow, but I don't want to just do the same recap the same time again. So let's just have Thomas and Harry have a conversation. And I was like, I honestly
Except this is
prefer a
how he
recap.
always does the recap.
I would just prefer a straightforward recap to
I
Thomas
honestly feel
talking.
like he does this type of recap often, though, where it's not even a recap. He'll do like two recaps where at the beginning he'll say like
He
it
does
it'll
do two
he
recaps.
does two recaps, right, Hannah? Because at the
Yeah.
beginning it's a situation where Dresden comes in and he's like, here's the thing. I've been saving Chicago for a while now. And then you literally have later on in the book where one of the characters in this fashion will ask Dresden, why is it that you continue to torture yourself and save the world the way you do, since there is very little pay?
Yeah. And Harry's like, I put this, Thomas asks Harry a lot of quote unquote, why are you like this? And Harry's just like, quote unquote, because. I'm like, that's pretty much what
Not
it
even
is.
sure because
Um,
I don't have
they
any money.
they do get away from the Kongs, and Harry
Hmm.
has to deliver the puppies to O'Hare in the chapel because we need another
To
chapel scene,
Brother Wong.
which was so racist. Like the
Incre
actual
did You didn't listen to the audiobook, Hannah? This was worse than
oh,
Shiro.
but here's the thing, Laura. The Kindle version is not great either because he's probably reading
It's all
exactly what the
phonetically
Kindle.
spelled out.
It's
You can't.
phonetically spelled out.
Oh,
It says
I hate when that
Miss
happens.
Sir, like Miss Space Sir
Uh,
Dresden. And I was horrified. Like I was so upset when I read that.
no.
Um, so Harry delivers it to this monk who has to go back home, and they think that these dogs come from like a special line of dogs that are blessed by a
Mhm.
god. And Harry has a moment where he's like, the last time I was here, I saw Shiro be the token Asian and die right on this
And
floor. Like,
here we have our other token Asian. That's why
just
it's bringing back
speaking
memories.
phonetically. It was so gross.
Yeah,
And so
didn't like that.
Harry's
And
headed.
he says something about like Shiro taught me so much in a short amount of time, and I have here, he did? What did you learn?
Question mark? And so Harry goes back out, and Thomas has like enchanted this female officer who knows Murphy for some reason because
Yeah,
apparently this is the
everyone
tiniest
knows
town in the
Karen
world.
Murphy. Like,
And she's
this is
like,
small town Chicago.
and she's like, you must be Dresden. I've heard a lot about you from Murph. And she is unimpressed. And then Harry's like, why did you have to do that? And then Harry is immediately attacked by someone he thought was
Black Court
security.
disguise.
It's a black court vampire. And Harry and Thomas are able to fight it off. I did like this. Harry has holy water balloons, and I do think
I
that
know.
is funny.
I think that's very funny too. I had that as a note too, that they use holy water balloons.
Because black courts are more like the traditional vampires we think of. They're affected by the sunlight, they're affected by garlic.
Hmm.
They're old and they're incredibly dangerous.
Crucifixes, that kind of stuff, yeah.
But this one looks like one of the people from the masquerade. So it was someone that Mav,
Mav, right? Was it Mav?
I think it was Mav.
It's hard for me to tell with some of the pronunciations that he does
Also hard
because I have another one later that I'm like, was it Inari or Amari? I can't understand him.
It's hard because then Jim Butcher does this thing where he's like, "Oh yeah, we brought back Mav. So let me name
But there's
one of the
also
characters
Madge.
Madge." And it's like, "Why would you do that in a million years, Jim Butcher? That's a
Excuse you?
terrible idea. You could have named her anything, anything
We
but
also have Bob and Bobby in
we
this
also have
book.
Murph and Marv. Like
Hmm.
so many just bad names. So anyway, they fight off this black court guy, and Harry's
I
like,
also
"Well,
just need to point out, like, Harry with every time that he goes and like gets his stuff, I kind of imagine him having like a Mary Poppins type stuff
I'm pretty sure he does."
situation where he's
Because
just
he talks
pulling out
about
all
like
these things. Because I'm like, how does he have all this? It must be like those dusters or like that or something.
he talks about like, well, at one point he puts the puppy in his pocket, and I was like, how
Yep,
big is this pocket, or how
it's
little
small.
is
It's a
this
small
puppy?
puppy.
And Harry's blasting rod is always just thrown in some type of bag, and I'm like, that
Hmm.
sounds like it's a really big
It's
like
got to be like a Mary
rod.
Poppins situation
Yeah, it
somehow,
has to
either with the
be.
duster or he's got a bag
So
that's like a
anyway, there
Mary
is a
Poppins.
stowaway in the car, and it is the puppy with the notched ear because he
Yep,
does have to stick around for a while, and he
and he's
hates evil
chewing on a
things.
vampire ear.
Yeah, and Harry's like, well, Mav is back, and she's gonna come after me because all vampires hate Harry Dresden. And then we they Thomas is like, hey, I want you to help my friend Arturo. He is a movie producer. I'm not going to tell you what type
Hmm.
of movie producer because
And so then
Bob
we
has to tell
immediately
you that.
guessed.
Yeah, and so they go to this party where everyone's dressed in little slinky dresses, and Justine is there. And at one point, like Thomas makes her not remember anything in a conversation pretty much and like
Yeah.
stop talking because she wants to bring up something about Thomas. And right before this, they did have a talk about Justine where Harry's like, you're obviously in
Yeah.
love with her. And he's like, she's a good meal. And Harry's like, well, I like Burger King, but I don't eat there every day. And I was like, what a wonderful way to talk about
I
women.
feel like that's the worst comparison he could have possibly made. And he was just like, you know what? We'll compare women to Burger King.
Yeah, I mean, but she is his food. So that
Ugh,
is, but he loves his food. So I too love food, but not in that way. Like it's gross. So
troubling.
anyway, they talk to Arturo. Arturo talks about how he thinks someone put the evil eye on him. Two people have died, these women around him, in really weird ways. Like one woman was on a
Hmm.
jet ski and a car hit her. And then I honestly forget how the other woman died.
I did not have a note of that, so I don't know.
She died suspiciously. So, oh, she opened up a car and she was stung by a million bees. How did
Oh
we
yeah,
both
that's what it was.
forget that?
You know what? And I should have remembered that because I keep seeing there's like this show on like ABC or something that's
Mhm.
like
Oh
some
yeah,
kind of
I've
cop
seen
type show
that
and they're
too. The
having like a bee
911.
NATO.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
having bee
And I'm
NATO
like,
because of
that
the
looks
killer.
ridiculous, but that's what this reminded me of.
But yeah, the killer bee situation. It also, I honestly, because like they opened up this man's car, so I was thinking of
Yeah.
Joe from Arrested Development, where he gets all the bees and they're living in the limo. That's what I was
Amazing.
picturing. So two different energies.
I just saw that commercial way too many times because I've
I've
never
seen it
watched
so many
that
times
show.
on TikTok. They're really pushing the bee episode on 9.
Yeah.
So anyway, they kind of talk about like these murders. He thinks there's an evil eye on him. Harry agrees to take the case, but he has to work undercover because people don't believe in wizards, even though people are dying
Still.
suspiciously. And it's like, yeah, just bring in a fucking wizard. I don't
Yeah.
care.
At what point do we
Um,
start to believe in wizards?
and so then Harry goes home.
And
He
we have to have an exposition dump of what Bob is again.
Yep. And Bob informs Harry that Arturo is a well-known man who makes adult films, and Bob's a
Which
huge
we
fan.
could have guessed it when it's like, I'm not gonna tell you what type of movies he makes. Of
And
course.
so Harry has the puppy with him. He goes to bed that night, and then he goes to see Murph the next day to ask her to help hunt down the Black Court vampires because he's just going to take them
Which
all out.
Bob's gonna go out and in
Oh yeah,
Mister again to get some
Bob went out and
info.
missed her to get info for him, and she agrees to
hmm
help, but she says, "Could we make it for Saturday so I can skip my family reunion because I'm just a female character trope?"
Here's the thing. There's going because we learn a little bit later on that there's more going on with this family reunion. I called it immediately right
Oh,
when they started talking about this
obviously.
that Harry's going to have to go to this masquerading as Murphy's
Probably.
boyfriend at
Yeah.
some point,
Hmm.
and that will be puke
Terrible.
inducing for me.
Yeah. And so then she agrees to help him here, but she also has to watch the puppy for the day. So Harry goes to the
Yeah.
production area. While he's
Well,
there,
first though, he's talking to her and he's like, "We need to get some thugs to help us in case
oh yeah.
we need him. Like, we need some manpower." And she's like, "Why don't you ask that night?" And he's like, "No, I've asked him too much, and he has kids." And
Oh,
I'm
I
like,
was so,
"What?"
it's again one of those moments where I'm like, well, at least Harry cares that he has kids because Michael sure as fuck doesn't. Like, and Harry is like, well, he wouldn't have protection armor because Michael can only be protected when he shows up because Jesus told him to. Like, that's pretty
This,
much what's said. And it's
I
so
just
strange.
the way that he has flip-flopped on Michael just
I
blows
mean,
my
it's just because
mind.
he doesn't want to have Michael in this book. Michael's been
Yeah,
in too many books and he was tired about writing about him.
that's
So,
true.
um, they do go
And the
through who
White
they can
Council
hire.
doesn't care about Harry, which is what we learned. So
I mean,
even
they
though
never
we
do.
already knew that because they're mentioned 0 times.
Yeah. So Harry does go to the production. He meets a usual lineup of suspects, which is where I'm telling you, like, this is more murder
Yeah.
mystery, where it's like we have
Yes.
Bobby, we have Madge, we have Trisha, we have Lucille, we have
Jake.
Giselle, we have Jake. Um, and so
Joan.
Harry is like meeting them. They're all like, "You're early because Arturo wasn't going to be here until the afternoon because Vixie won't be here." Um, Trixie, sorry. Wow.
Well, it's
I got
Trixie Vixen. What a
Trixie
tongue twister.
Vixen. Sorry, that was probably why I got Vixie. So anyway, he's there and he suddenly feels this evil power come by and he runs into the shower where everyone is getting ready together. I mean, it's an
hmm
adult film. They probably don't care about nakedness, but still weird
Yeah.
vibe to be like all in the shower at the same time. And there's a woman there who has been harmed. Her name is Giselle. She has like these scars on her neck or these slashes on her
hmm
neck. He has to resuscitate her and use his smarts to make sure she doesn't bleed out by keeping her cold. He
So let me just kind of so he breaks the hex and then has to do CPR, but then he mentions how hard doing CPR is, which I appreciated that real world
mhm.
tidbit. But then he's like, I'm so good at CPR that I did it for 6 or 7 minutes. And I was like, really? You did?
Also, why do you care? So
Like, what a weird flex.
they
Just
get the
you already
paramedics
saved her
there.
life.
Harry definitely saved her life by keeping her cold and being the strongest man in the world.
hmm
Uh, and so they're all like, well, we'll get back to work in the afternoon. And so Harry has to like go away for a little bit, and then he comes back and they're like, "You're late." And I'm like, "What's happening?" Like, this is so wild of how often
It's
they
so
have to like,
weird because he has to keep taking breaks and then coming back, and he's
oh
claiming
yeah,
to be like a production assistant
but
as
he's
his
never
cover.
working. Um,
No, he's just kind of standing around and asking too many questions, which is why I don't understand.
but anyway, so he leaves for a while. And we find out that Arturo like pissed off a lot of people because he was able to get out of his
Hmm.
old production company to make his own production company. And he had something in his contract where he could use all of the old actors for at least
Was it
3 months.
Silver Light or Silver Line? I can't remember.
Honestly, not a fact that I had any memory of
Okay.
or
I could
listened
not
to.
understand what he was saying if it was Silver Light or Silver Line.
I'll look it up for you next time and probably will forget. But
Okay,
anyway, so he
that's
was
fine.
able to take the actors and actresses for 3 months. And so, like, this old production company's pissed at him. He also has three ex-wives, Madge, Lucille, and soon to be ex-wife, Trisha, aka Trixie Vixen.
Hmm.
They
Which
may be
seems very
suspect.
like you. I didn't think about this before, but it is like you said, a very Clue type situation.
Yeah, no, it's just
We
like that.
have
Here's your
someone that's
usual
like
lineup.
Trixie Vixen.
I was here for it, honestly. It worked for my mind of like, I'm
Yeah,
here for just a procedural, let's find out who the killer is. Because
yeah,
Harry realizes that he doesn't think Arturo is the main person who's it's after, it's the women around him. So that brings the
yeah. And he also
ex-wives
has
in.
to explain how enraged he gets when people hurt women.
Yeah. Uh So we have Jake, we have Giselle who's injured, and we also have this other woman who like we find out has children and is a sex worker,
Yeah.
so we should care about her more.
Hmm.
But actually this is the part where Laura and I were saying good on Jim Butcher because this is a
Yeah.
character who
Isn't her name Emma or something? Or am
I
I?
I forget what her
One of
name
them's
is.
named Emma, and I
Okay.
can't remember which one it is.
But there's like a good conversation where Harry makes some type of like comment and she takes it as a jibe and she's like, "Hey, this is real work and like please do not
Hmm.
belittle my
Yeah.
job." And he's like, "Oh, that's not actually my intent." And she's like, "Okay, well
Which
like
I
I'm
think that
just
is Emma then.
yeah." And he's like and he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That wasn't actually my intent. I'm really sorry." Like and they have a
Hmm.
good conversation about like
Yeah.
adult films, which again,
I
I
was
think
surprised by this.
again, it's more early 2000s of like, this is pretty progressive. But then
Hmm.
you also have moments of Harry being like, watching adult films be made is weird. And I'm like,
Hmm.
Harry, be an
There's
adult in the
still
room.
very
Like,
much a situation where he does, even though he can be understanding, he still very much seems to pity them.
yes, exactly. He still thinks that he has to be the savior.
He needs to
Um,
save these women.
and at one point he's like, I'm really mad that someone's going after these women. Call me something. And I was like, what a freaking martyr to be like,
Yeah.
call me a pig if you must, but I just want to save women. And I'm like, this is how a lot of men view themselves who have a
Yeah.
ton of internalized misogyny. So you have to be
Yep.
really careful about a character like this. Like, you can't just
Hmm.
call me old fashioned. I just think women shouldn't be murdered. And I'm like, well, I actually believe that all people are equal and that women also don't deserve to be murdered. So guess we're
Right.
on the same page. So anyway, Harry goes to his office really quickly and he is held at gunpoint. Boom, 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 boom. And it's Kincaid. And
Somebody
I
somebody
also
he puts a sleeping mask on him.
he puts a sleeping mask on him and then he like covers like he puts a little salt around Harry so
Yeah,
Harry can't use
he's
his
made a
power.
salt circle and then there's energy from blood and it's like, okay.
And so he's doing it to protect himself so he can talk to Harry and quote unquote make sure Harry's who he says he is. And I was like, and Harry's like,
Hmm.
I promise I am. And he's like, okay, well then I'm gonna. And Harry has
And
to
to which I was like, that's all the double checking you're going to do? Okay.
also, I plumb forgot who Kincaid was for like half of the chapter. I was like,
So
who is this? And it's the
the way that
guy.
the dialogue is in this is so different that I was like, oh, I recognize the name, and I was like, why do I know Kincaid's name? And I was like, isn't it the same as the guy that's with Ivy? But the
Hmm.
dialogue is so different that he's like a little more dynamic now
Yeah.
that I was like, oh, okay, this is the same guy.
Yeah, he is the same man. So he Harry wants to hire him. Harry's gonna owe him a lot of money, and he's like, hey, if you can't pay me, I will kill you. That's just how this
Hmm.
works. So sorry, I'm not sorry. And Harry's like, well, that's upsetting, but I do need him, so I am going to hire him. And
I
he's
guess
going
I'll
to
come
be
with the
like the
money.
third to Harry, Murph, and Kincaid to go after the Black
Yeah.
Court vampires. But Kincaid is also still working for Ivy. So I'm like, are you allowed to take outside party?
Right. That's what
I
I was
was
kind of
very
wondering
confused.
too. I was a
Seems
little
like Ivy's
confusing.
a full-time job.
Right. And then he also like at this point we're getting enough background on Kincaid and so I had guessed here like, oh yeah, he's got to be some kind of supernatural person. And then literally within seconds, Dresden was like accusing him of being supernatural. He's like,
And
I don't
he's
know
like,
what you
I'm
mean.
a
I'm a human just
full-fledged
like you.
human. I just kill people with all of my bullets. So he says, like, okay, agreed, I'll come back, you know. And so Harry goes to pick up the puppy from Murphy. She is
Hmm.
really upset because her baby sister is engaged. And Harry's like, well, you've
I
been,
hated all of this
it's just
because obviously
so, it
it hasn't happened
does,
yet, but we're going to have to drag. So the situation is
it
her
just,
baby sister's engaged and she's going to be bringing her to the family reunion. Her family is Irish Catholic and you have to be married. And
and
she's twice
she's been
divorced, so
divorced twice.
she's really an embarrassment to her family and she cannot show up at that family reunion without a man. And so it hasn't happened yet, but Dresden's likely going to have to go masquerading as
Yeah.
her
And
boyfriend. And then
so,
she says a hurtful thing too to Harry because he's like, "Oh man, I wish I had family problems." And she's like, "You can't even imagine."
well,
And
that
it's
happened
like,
earlier. That happened when they were
oh, did
doing
it
like
happen
that
earlier?"
happened at the first scene because in this scene, I also hated this scene because she's sitting there talking about like very complex emotions,
Hmm.
very silly emotions on one level because like I hate the stupid plot line of my
Yeah.
baby sister is engaged and I'm not even dating anyone. But she
Hmm.
talks about how her mom always raised her to be like the next matriarch. That was the
Yeah.
expectation as the oldest daughter. She and her
Yep.
mom have a very close relationship and it was hurt after all of the divorces being from a Catholic family. And then it was
Yeah.
hurt more because Murphy started looking into this other world stuff and her mother could never understand. And she does not
Yes.
want to open up that door. So she is not as close with her mother because she keeps things from her mother. And I was like, wow, what a dynamic thing to give a character that you just gave
Yeah.
something very silly and stupid to. Harry's answer to this is to say, well, I'm an orphan, so you're lucky that you
Yes.
have these complex family dynamics. And I was like,
And it's
I
like,
understand in the
okay.
previous section you had this moment of him being like, wow, that was really hurtful what you said. It does
Hmm.
not excuse him from her being like, I have very complex family dynamics. And he's like, well, I'm an orphan. And it's like, that's
And also
not
it's kind of a
okay.
thing where it's like it doesn't always have to be about you, Harry. Like you can let Murphy have a moment
You
where
can
you're
let Murphy have one moment.
you can let her have a single moment where she's like kind of venting about what's going on. And
Even
and
because
and at the
later
same time, like
he
it's
literally
also hurtful
says,
for like her to say that,
yes.
like to say you can't even imagine or whatever it was.
But she
Like I get that, but
stops
at the
in
same
the
time, it's
moment.
just
Like she
like
realizes what she did and she
yeah,
feels
and she
awful about it.
apologizes.
Harry is just like, Murphy's my best friend. Murphy, I'm an orphan. You should feel bad about this. And it's like, that's not the same thing, Harry. Don't do
Yeah, and
that.
the tone of it is very much like we're supposed to be on Dresden's
Harry's
side.
side. Yeah,
And it's like,
it's
oh, okay.
wild take. I was like flabbergasted when I read that where he was like,
Hmm.
well, you're really lucky to have an uncle who will make comments about you being single. It's like, what? Excuse you.
Right.
Um, and so Harry goes, he takes the puppy, he gives it to the PA, and he goes to meet Arturo. They talk about how dangerous the situation is. And then Trixie, aka Trisha, and she's like, I legally changed my name. I'm always Trixie Vixen now. She comes
Yeah.
in and she's the
She's
worst woman in the
furious.
world.
Yeah, with
She's screaming at everything. They say she's always late. They say she's the worst person. She's like, I'm the star of this production. I can't believe you hired her. She's an old
she's kind of
bag.
like the red herring of it all, where I feel like we're supposed to think it's her. You know
I
what I
mean, she's
mean?
just
Because it's like
terrible.
she's terrible, so obviously it's her.
But then a beautiful woman walks in, and
But
Harry is like, I am
Dresden can barely contain himself.
It's like I am horny, horny, horny for her, and her name is
Hmm.
Laura. And Laura is Harry. Like she walks out of the room. Harry's like, I'm so attracted to her. She must be a vampire with a white
Yeah.
core. We have a vampire of the white core on the premises who
Hmm.
works as a as a exotic film person, and so he's like watching it get made. He is going va 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 voom over. Well, oh, but before he goes down to see this production something tries to attack him in the office and he's like,
Hmm.
well, I am on the right track. And he sees this like book that's dropped by whatever attacks him that's like writing mean comments on all these women's faces who were married to Arturo. So it's very weird. And he also has like a
Which,
conversation with,
okay, I'm
oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
I'm getting a little lost. So yeah, so Laura comes in and then she has like they chat about her little sister being involved in films now too,
Oh yeah,
and they're
I forgot
chatting
about
about like the
that.
safety of the place, and like Laura like puts the moves on Harry and is like, "Ooh, I like him, tall, dark, and shady," or whatever she says about him, like quiet over there, and then he immediately calls her out as being a succubus for the White Court, and then we Murphy gives him information on Arturo,
Yes.
and then she mentions that he's considered like kind of a revolutionary person. He's done all these interviews and stuff, and also Murphy like makes a joke that makes Harry like very uncomfortable, and I was like, interesting that the man who constantly talks about cleavage is uncomfortable with a boob joke, but what, whatever.
He
And
doesn't
then
like that Murphy is saying it, like talking
right,
about boobs.
so weird. But yeah, then the lights like flick off. He's in this office and he sees like a shadow and he runs after him, but it's like super dark. And so they get away and he finds like it was a blowgun dart.
Someone tried to
Which,
kill him with a blowgun dart. Yeah.
which I don't know why that makes me laugh so much. Whatever. It's like we have all these other things that are being used, and I don't know why blowgun dart just makes me laugh. Where it's like almost like spitballish. It just seems so non-complex compared to all the other things.
Right.
But yeah, then he starts reading these articles and he sees Madge in one of them, and then there's a picture of Trixie Vixen that says "Rotten hell, you pig"
That's what I was thinking
across
of.
it.
Um, yeah, and I guess it's like, oh, it's Arturo's scrapbook. I'm sorry. So like Arturo had the scrapbook showing that he had like been in Oprah and been on Larry King
Yeah,
and
it's
like
all these
that's what,
articles about him.
and then he wrote that on Trixie Vixen's page, which is this very weird.
If
Um,
if he wrote it, it might have been somebody else.
That's true. So Harry heads down, and this is where we get the scene of him watching a an adult film be made. And Harry is like sitting there with the puppy. He's working, he's saying how weird it is to see all this happen. Joan like kind of Carrie like has a talk up with Joan about Arturo, how he's such a nice guy, but he falls in love too fast, and you can't trust him. Um, or he can't be like trusted with women that often.
Hmm.
And he like Harry's like, well, this is just really awkward. And
Yeah, he
he
talks about how pornos aren't real life. Like, this is just not what it's really
I'm
like.
just really into actual women. I just like that.
Yeah.
Um,
And then he like listens in on that girl that was holding the dog for a while, which
and
I can't
she's
remember if her name is Amari or Inari.
it
I
is
couldn't understand it.
I think it's
And she's on the phone with
Amari.
her dad and uh says, "Oh, he's here." And it's Bobby is who she's
So
referring to.
she might have a crush on Bobby. And Harry's
Yeah.
like, oh, it's Inari. Sorry,
Inari. Okay, I could
Inari.
not understand what he was saying.
And so Harry's like, and he calls him Bobby the Sullen because Bobby is moody.
Hmm. And then
And
he
so,
sees like this figure that's like lurking over at the side and follows him and ends up like chasing him around outside these buildings in Chicago. And they get into a little fight.
and it's
And
Thomas.
Thomas.
And Harry's like, you set me up. And Thomas is like, you don't even know what you're talking about. And Harry's like, I told you to shut up. Give me one good reason I should
He
blast
says,
your
"Give me
lying
two
mouse.
good reasons."
No, he says, now give me one good reason. And then
Oh,
all
and
of a
then she
sudden
says
he
two good
hears two
reasons.
distinct clicks behind him, and Laura is there in her maddeningly alluring voice, and she murmurs, I'll give you two.
I'll give you two.
And that is the end of the first 14 chapters of this
Whew.
book. Man, just whipped right through them so fast.
But there is a weird thing where it's like, why are we leaving and coming back so much?
Why is Harry going on so many errands?
I don't understand that.
Harry had to get
I
a
did
side
think
hustle as
about
a
that too,
task
where it's just like,
rabbit.
why is there so much back and forth happening?
He's just like, I have to go. And then at one point they're like, you're late. And he was like, well, I was on time earlier today. What?
It's so weird.
So anyway, everyone, join us next week as we dive into chapters 15 through 28. I'm saying that for Laura's benefit and your own if you're following along with the page numbers with us. So far, I'm liking it. Laura's not convinced. I like a good murder mystery, and I feel like this is a murder
I don't know.
mystery.
I thought
So
I I was really into Summer Night, and the last one I think was quite a romp. So I think it's just maybe taking me a little bit to warm up, and I just don't like vampires.
That is also not going to help the situation at all.
No, whoops, too many vampires.
So yeah, but if you are enjoying following along with us, make sure you're following us on all the social platforms, OWWR Pod, and make sure you are keeping an eye out for the giveaway for our indie mission winner. If you were listening last week, you know that it is Michelle Quirk's The Fires of Treason. So please keep an eye out for a giveaway for that book, plus maybe some goodies from our pod ourselves. So keep an eye out for that. Make sure that you are entering to win, because we will be covering that next month, guys. Next month we're on Indie Mission, and then it is the December months where we just kind of do our own thing, and
we do whatever we want.
Yeah, but like, guys, book 6, Dresden's coming to an end soon. We're gonna come back later, but this is it for a while.
The year of the Dresden we'll be taking a break from the year of the Dresden.
Yeah, it's coming to a short
break.
We've gone, we remember.
I don't like that song, but
nobody does. But a lot of people who are younger than us don't know that song anymore because it's not used as a graduation song. So think about that sometimes.
Rightly so.
So yeah, hope you guys are all enjoying. Like I said, follow us on all the social platforms or check out our pod, owwrpod.com, for some great reviews that Laura's going to be putting up soon. So keep an eye out for
Sphinx
that.
Reviews will be up soon. I am part of a Sphinx team, so I will be putting some reviews up if you are interested in those, or maybe you have got some books entered in Sphinx. You can check out which ones I will be reading over on rpod.com.
So keep an eye out for that. And if you so choose, you could also join us over on Patreon for some wonderful additional content, or to help us just keep the lights running on this this wonderful podcast and this labor.
And you know what? Hannah's sitting in a dark room, actually. This is not a lie.
Help me put the lights on. You can follow us. We have $1, $3, $5, and $10, and gets you many different levels of bonus content. Also, please,
we really appreciate the support.
We do. Also, make sure you are rating, reviewing, and subscribing. That is also a great way to get more people in. It is really important. It does really make a difference. Or just tell a friend about us. We're happy to be your chat around the dinner table. Hey, I listened to a really funny podcast. They talked about Harry Dresden for far too long. So make sure.
And thanks for listening today. We really appreciate you tapping in with us every week and listening to our rambles.
Yeah, as we go on and on and on, as we go on.
And now we got to cut it off because Laura will lose it with this song.
Laura is going to leave meetings. So please make sure you're joining us next week. Bye.
Bye.